welcome to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists take a look at gaming through a feminist lens. And you have joined myself, Alex, we've got Matt, and we've got Jem with us as well. Hello. And we are going to have another episode of gaming news to bring you, hot off the press or otherwise, things that we've picked up lately that we've been having a look at, that we want to have a chat about in this episode. And I'm going to mix up the order. I went to first with my story last episode, so I'm going to ask Matt, what gaming news have you brought to the table? Bad time to ask you, but I think you're ready to go now, aren't you? All right.
Just about.
Cool.
New Final Fantasy has been released. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It looks amazing. I've just been replaying the first one, and it's better than I remember. With some flawed, let's say, representation, and especially got the running. We need to do an episode on how women are animated, because the amount of girls that run like that is embarrassing. So, but the thing. So I'm sure we've all have seen the beach scene now with the ridiculous, extremely over the top bikinis. And just come on, guys.
Or under the top bikinis.
Yeah.
And so, but looking at censorship, I'm interested in censorship in a minute. I googled it to see, because I imagined it would be censored. I was looking at government censorship, seeing where governments have done that. And the main thing that came up was that Tifa, the massive boob one, her cleavage has been censored. And there was a fake story that the beach scene had been censored. But actually, it's a different scene. So hopefully you should be able to see this on the camera just about. So if you look in close, that's Tifa. And on the top one, that's what from the that's from the trailer from 4 years ago. And on the one below is the current one, and she's got a black sports bra on underneath.
Yes.
So that's what's being complained about, and she is 15 in that segment of the game. And what the angle I was thinking of coming at this from is sexualization of children is at the core of what this is. When does an adorable cherubic little girl become a massive boobed, sexy, sexualized woman? And what should happen in this situation when the original is, you've got the original set? Are they right to have done this? Should they have done more? Should they have changed more? What does this mean?
Good questions, Matt. I think.
So are they complaining that the crop top has been added? Is that what the complaints are? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Alex.
I think all of the portrayals of the characters in Final Fantasy are unrealistic anyway. So they're within that bubble. I'm not excusing it, obviously, but they're already not realistic depictions of people. So we've got to go in with that kind of lens on. But long-time fans of the pod might remember my reaction to Final Fantasy VII Remake when I once streamed it during an episode of the pod and was incredibly grumpy the entire time. And more so when I saw the depictions of characters like Tifa and the other ones whose names I forget. But yeah, it was just insultingly unrealistic. I found it insulting anyway. And I get that I'm not coming in with a lot of childhood nostalgia. It's different interestingly, could do an interesting comparison with my feelings about that and my feelings about Tomb Raider, because when it comes to the Tomb Raider remake, the remaster that's recently come out, I have a lot of childhood nostalgia attached to that, but I still feel like Lara's unrealistic in terms of her bust size compared to the rest of her body, because it's just, I mean, it's technically, I suppose, it could be realistic, but it is putting forward this idealised view of a female body that's not necessarily a healthy one to put out there. Yeah, I don't... especially when you told me the age of the character as well, Matt. She's meant to be 15 years old. That doesn't really sit right, but maybe I'm just being really judgy. I'm not a parent either, so I can't really speak from that point of view. But how do you feel about it, Jem?
Well, I think that the issue is, I mean, as you say, that the characters in that genre are often very unrealistic, at the best of times. But I personally think that the addition of the black crop top is probably a positive thing. It's, there are so many games, and we've talked about, ridiculous armor that female characters are expected to wear. There are so many games where women and female characters are given these things that wouldn't stay in place, wouldn't be protective, and they're just there to make them look hot and sexy, which is some sort of payoff for the fact that they're powerful. It feels like it's so much about the male gaze, and so I do think that is problematic in general. And so I think, if you're running around having adventures, you are going to wear a crop top. You're probably going to wear a sports bra, to be fair, because, let's be honest, these things are, practical additions to your ass-kicking lifestyle. So I think it's telling that people get upset about it, that people are looking so carefully at this young character's chest that they're even noticing these things or caring enough about these things to get up in arms about it. And I think that also, the other thing that we never talk about when we're discussing these topics, I mean, we do, but other people don't, is that it's paedophilic. Yeah. We have, I'm very much in to QAnon at the moment, not into it that way, but like listening. I'm listening to a podcast about it called Finding Q, and it's really interesting, but it's just another example of the contradictory nature of so many of these the patriarchal society and the far right and all of this, that you have this, on one hand you have this, like, we have to go out and protect the world from these paedophilic lizard people that are, stealing our children and abusing them. However, it's perfectly okay for us to watch, cartoons and video games which are borderline paedophilic depictions of young children. So I think there's this contradiction that goes on in our world, in our culture, and this is an example of that, as far as I can see. The characters, they're all supposed to be young. And I think they could have resolved this by either making them a little bit older, or just, dressing them a little bit more demure. No, demure has such negative connotations, but more practically. Yeah,
I think more would realistically be what I would like for the situation at hand.
And it comes down to, I completely agree. It's the girlification of adult women. It's that the reason like they put her in that cowgirl outfit at the, like, when she was 15, because they want it to be a sexy look. That's why they did it. And so when they go, all right, we're going to tone it back a bit. She's still wearing a cowgirl outfit. We'll just put a cropped up on. That isn't solving the problem. The problem is that we're going, oh, we've got this attractive 20-year-old woman, and we're going to age her down a bit. And it's that grey area that so much of how women are portrayed and characters created in that grey area. And it's that grey area, for some reason, there's a huge amount of men that there's a demand for that grey area, because it's all over pornography. It's very, very unsettling. And it just supports my theory that most men stop developing at the age of 15 because they look and go, they want to be back in that place of, but they can't, because when they were 15 they'd be attracted to 15-year-olds, and now they're 30 and they just go, oh, but I'll have that grey area. That grey area is enough. And so it's better to put the crop top on in some ways, but it's putting a plaster on a huge wound. But
exactly.
Again, that's something we talk about in the future.
Indeed, yes. Jem, what news did you bring for this episode?
This is a heavy one.
Ooh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
I'm sorry. This article was actually shared to me by my husband this morning. It's an article from the Guardian by Keza MacDonald, and they're talking about that it's 10 years since Gamergate happened, and so Gamergate, I think, is the elephant in the room for almost all of our conversations about inclusion and gender imbalance within the gaming industry. You know, Gamergate is an example of why it is so important that we have these conversations that we have regularly on Gaming the System, and it's one of the reasons why Gaming the System needs to exist, and we need to be challenging these attitudes and supporting the people that are challenging these attitudes. So for those who don't know what happened with Gamergate, because it was 10 whole years ago and we all have short memories, so back in 2014, a game developer called Zoe Quinn had created a computer game called Depression Quest, which was a sort of story-based game, which we've talked a lot about games like that, and they're very popular these days. But it was relatively new concept then, and it's difficult to know how petty this actually got at the or was to begin with, or how it all depends on who you talk to and where they fit in this discussion. But anyway, her ex-boyfriend, I'm not sure actually about, I'm going to call Zoe they, because throughout the article that I read they referred to them as they, so I'm not sure if they are a they, if they're non-binary. But Zoe's ex-boyfriend posted a big, long, ranty blog about their relationship and a whole bunch of personal stuff, shared a bunch of personal messages and things, basically, essentially saying that they had slept with somebody who had, in exchange for good reviews of the game, because the game was obviously so far off the beaten track that it couldn't possibly get good reviews. So the only way that could have happened was this sort of exchange of sexual favours. Now, this then blew up into what became known as Gamergate, because it was messages that were sent with the hashtag Gamergate, and it ended up with a number of feminist and female voices and people within the games industry being targeted to a ridiculous degree. They were doxxed. They were sent death threats and rape threats and just a huge amount of abuse. So doxing is where people get all of your contact details, including your home address and phone number and what have you, and they put it online. So it's extremely scary. And this has ended up in various court cases and legal wranglings and all sorts of stuff, which I don't know the details of, but I know that it became a big thing. And both sides argue that, the other side is completely unreasonable and it was all okay. Essentially, it just came down to sort of a far right side of group of gamers who were having a go at a bunch of feminists and women because they felt that they were in their space, that they were taking over their space. So why is this news today? Well, other than it being a decade since this happened, what was brought up in this article was that there's a small 16-person design studio called Sweet Baby. Strange name, but anyway, Sweet Baby. And apparently they are now being targeted by a group of around 200,000 people from a group on Steam, plus more on the Discord channel, who are arguing that this group, these 16 people, have single-handedly been bullying the poor games industry into insane wokery. And that they have been going in and dictating to games industry, the games designers, that they must use people from more diverse ethnic backgrounds, that they must have more female leads, that they must have more representation from the LGBTQI community. Basically, anything that's sort of viewed to be woke by the far right of society. And they are saying that this company are basically bullying the games industry, and so they are attacking them. And the reality is that this is a script and story kind of help group. So they get brought in by games industry, get to look at games and to see where there's plot holes in a story, or where the conversation doesn't sound very realistic and stuff. So they don't have any say over who the lead characters are, or who what the story involves. They literally just come in to talk about, no, that sentence doesn't make sense, or this conversation doesn't flow, or whatever. But they're basically being harassed by this group. And it's just a sort of example of how, despite having this massive thing back in, in 2014, and all the damage that it did, and there's a whole thing about how it plays into the culture wars, how it plays into the election playbook, how it was picked up by Steve Bannon. It was it had a big effect, how it hooks in with 4chan and 8chan and, yep, you guessed it, QAnon. And it basically has a whole thing there. So there's this whole connection. And yet, despite all of that, here we are 10 years later with a very similar scenario kicking off, where poor white men are complaining that they're being written out of the games world. And I think, you literally do not have to take more than a couple of minutes to look at all the computer games that are available out there and see that is blatantly not true. It's not even close to true. Even in Baldur's Gate, which is, fantastically representative and brilliant, there are plenty of straight white men in that game. It's not, they are not at threat. So yeah, what do you guys think?
In order the ruling class are the source of every problem. This group of 200,000 men, they exist and are empowered because the ruling class goes, these idiots, they're going to police, and the point is to slow social progress, because social progress it progresses and it's inevitable, but the more it progresses, the more people go, oh yeah, we're all the same, and then we don't need to fight each other because we're all the same. We can fight upwards at the ruling class, and then we can get them out of power, out-organise them, and then we can start actually fixing things. But we have those 200,000 people. That is a profound resource, and they are motivated, they are enthusiastic, they are aggressive, they are intense. You just see that, you just see it wasted, all that energy and time, that if they just took the woman bit and delete that and type in ruling class, billionaires, corporations, capitalism, and then take all the stuff that they do there and then just direct it somewhere else, because their lives the wokery doesn't impact their lives at all. Like you say, you just need to Google for 4 minutes and you go, oh yeah, my life isn't changing and it won't change. In fact, it's going to get better, and it's just going to get better for everyone. But they just trick them into wasting their time and energy. But it has a devastating impact on the people that they're going against. And even though it's the social progress is progressing, they determine to make it as grueling, and they fight tooth and nail. And that's I just look at it and go, you're so close. Just turn it a little bit, and we just. Yeah, so that is a profoundly aggravating thing for me.
Yeah, I think the key thing I picked up on, Jem, is the purpose of that small company, Sweet Baby. Doesn't seem to be pushing a woke agenda from your description of what they actually do day to day. So they've been made a target. They've been pinned with this wokery agenda by this group of people who are clearly intent on finding a target and having something to throw all their hatred towards. And it must be having a terrible impact on those people, like Matt said. But I think it comes about as a result of just the internet as a space. Particularly social media is very much an us and them. It pits us against each other, essentially, is what it's designed to do. It's designed to make people angry and to argue all the time, particularly the site that shall not be named, Twitter. That's all it's good for, is causing arguments and showing you things that are going to make you angry. That's what all these algorithms are for. And that just is another part of this. And it's enabling us with our own echo chambers to surround ourselves with people who feel the same way, but also to see the opposite side and get angry about it and go at each other, basically. It's pretty awful, really, and there's no room for proper discussion or nuance on the internet, really, these days, or at least not in the form of social media. And spaces like this.
And I would argue that it's just distraction tactics from the real issues. Like, as Matt says, there are other things that people could be worrying about. And I think, that there are other things for us to worry about. There is, the rise of the right, this sort of but even beyond that, there's things that we have a climate crisis. Yeah. We have a climate crisis. And really, that is the only thing that we should be worrying about. Everything else is going to be irrelevant. Excuse me. So, I think it is a worry.
Yeah, certainly is. But yeah, that's definitely big story to think about, and hopefully we can follow up on any developments in future episodes as well. My final gaming news story is very similar to the story I last brought up in our last episode, because it involves the unfortunate shutting down and layoffs of everyone working for games media company Roosterteeth, who some of you may know. After 21 years, it's shutting down. It was acquired by Warner Brothers Discovery a couple of years ago, and because it's unprofitable, it's basically been cut and shut down. So everyone working for Roosterteeth has now been let go. So that some of you might know Roosterteeth for things like Ruby and Red vs. Blue, and also for gaming YouTube channels such as Achievement Hunter and Funhouse. I've been a long time follower of Funhouse since it started in 2015. And there was an offshoot of that called All Good No Worries, which only unfortunately lasted a short while, but was my most favourite YouTube channel of recent times, because it was very much created by women and femme-presenting people for women and femme-presenting people. And it was just a really nice, feel-good, chilled-out space on YouTube to just spend some time watching nice videos and things like that. But unfortunately, they're going to be winding things up in May, I believe. But so they're unfortunately all losing their jobs, but there might be space for them to move on to other things creatively. But yeah, when you think 21 years is actually an awfully long time for a company like that, and especially one that is based on the internet. But I think, let me read you the basically memo that came in from Roosterteeth itself to all its workers, and in the announcement to the wider public. It's with a heavy heart that I announce that Roosterteeth is shutting down due to challenges facing digital media resulting from fundamental shifts in consumer behaviour and monetization across platforms, advertising and patronage. Levin, who is the guy in charge, wrote in the memo obtained by Variety. This article I'm reading is from Variety, by the way. Our legacy is not just a collection of content, but a history of pixels burned into our screens, minds and hearts. Which was an interesting end to the memo. But basically, yeah, it's the same old thing, which is happening to a lot of companies and other organisations. You get acquired by a conglomerate who thinks, well, you're not being profitable enough, let's just get rid of you and cut you out. But it was interesting, the note I noted about shifts in consumer behaviour, and also just monetization of YouTube, just the development of YouTube with it over that 21-year period. How much has YouTube changed, and is it as popular anymore? I think it's definitely been overtaken by things like Twitch streamers and streaming as a medium rather than like sets of YouTube videos, and gaming groups on YouTube are certainly waning in popularity. But I just wondered if you guys had any thoughts on those sorts of things.
I think
I think TikTok's probably had quite a big impact over the years.
Yeah.
And I know that like there's some people that I follow on YouTube who are now doing with shorts, which is, I suppose, is a response to TikTok, and this idea that you can't watch longer videos. But if you go into it from the sort of marketing perspective, I've also seen that longer videos are actually doing better these days than they were.
Like the really long streams and things. Just having something on in the background all day. I think a video I watched that was reacting to it was kind of saying that streaming is like having a friend in your living room with you while you potter around for the day. So I guess in that way it's more of a comfort to people. But yeah, it's just interesting thinking about how our habits as consumers of media are obviously changing over these 2 decades, and have changed due to a number of different things. And even like the length of ads on YouTube now there used to be 5 seconds for every ad, and now it varies between 40 and 5, depending on like when you click on something. It's quite annoying, but it's forcing you to basically sign up to their premium no ads model, which a lot of things are offering these days. But yeah, everything is now been turned so that it can advertise to us to make money. Essentially, it's an advertising machine. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on that, Matt, as well.
Yeah, I think there's over the last 20 years, the means of production has been seized to a much greater extent, given that anyone with a laptop can make games now. And in the past, it would make sense for you want to build up your small studio, and then you want to get acquired by a massive studio, and then they can give you some resources so you can make bigger games. And I think there's this generations go on understanding more and more how they will be exploited by capitalism, and that if they sign themselves away to these companies aren't, they can do whatever they want with them, and it's not going to be based on common sense or anything. It's just, we want more of the money. And it would make far much more sense, even though it's a scarier and less can appear as a less stable option. There has never been more ways to fundraise for your content. So if Roosterteeth had stayed independent and had a Patreon and PayPal, and you can make tons of different kinds of content that you can get paid and ad revenue from, and that's probably the safest way for independent studios to conduct themselves, because people will pay for what they care about.
Yeah.
And it's better to put your fate in their hands than in the fate of people who could strike you off at any moment.
Certainly. I think that's a sentiment shared by a lot of the videos I was watching from former Funhouse members who had previously left and gone on to set up their own streams online, and they're all sort of self-funded through Patreons and things. But the important thing is that their content is then owned by them. They're not being dictated to by a company, and the content isn't owned by that company either. I think Funhouse did set up a membership program last year, and they said if they hadn't have done that, then they would have had to be shut down much earlier. And that revenue from the membership section definitely helped with funding that extra year of content. So yeah, I think they're looking into being more independent and owning their own content, hopefully, in the future. But yeah, that's the trouble. When you're owned by a larger company, it's all dictated by that company and what they want to do and whether or not you're making enough money. So it's difficult.
And because the structure for most of the last 100 years was you go to school, you leave, you get a job, and then you work that job for 60 years, you retire, 5 years later you die. That's what that's what the generations before us has told us, that's what you're supposed to do. And so you're supposed to go, oh, I've built this thing up, and now if I can get acquired by them, then I'm part of a company, and then I can do that forever. Whereas that's not the best way now. The best way is to, you build it up, you make your games, and then you basically you have to be an entrepreneur. The most stable way for a lot of creative people is to be an entrepreneur, and that is terrifying. Because you don't have any rights, you don't have any sick pay. Everything is more.
Yeah.
There's more risk, but that's what this generation needs to recognise, that's the starting point we need to come from, and then we can work out. There's a society systemic way for this to work, but as long as we've got this ruling class crushing us down, it's not going to happen.
There we are then. And that, I think, brings neatly to a close this episode. Thank you very much for watching or listening. If you have time, please leave us a lovely review, leave us a comment, let us know what news you've heard. If you have anything you want to say about the news you've heard on this episode or previous episodes, let us know. Share it with your friends if you want them to find out all the latest gaming news. We do release new episodes every Thursday as well. If you'd like to support us, speaking of supporting independent creators, you can do so. We've got a Patreon, and the link should be somewhere in the description, so please go and check it out. And we'll be with you again sometime soon, so we'll see you then. All right, bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.